Hey everyone, welcome to the investor.bet AFL Round 6 betting trend report. In this video, I'm going to go through all 8 games coming up this week because Melbourne and Richmond both have their bye, so only the 8 games. But I'm going to go through each matchup, what the betting trends are, what the odds were last time and previous meetings when these two sides met each other, and the betting trends that have come from their previous matches, and go through my early thoughts and potential bets for each game. And then I'll be posting videos later in the week once I've locked in my exact bets on each matchup and posting what those are, diving deeper into the statistics and the analytics and that information as to what my exact bets are on that game. But before we get into this week's matchups, let's quickly look at what happened last week. There were 8 games, obviously, last week as well. 4 games went over the total, 4 games went under. So far this season, 24 of the 46 games have gone under the total, so still a slight lean towards the unders overall in the season. There are a few teams that are really leaning one way or the other. Adelaide had their first over game this week to go 1-4 on the season against Carlton. Brisbane still a big underside this season. Fremantle a big underside. North are overside so far this year. St Kilda going unders as well. So a few mismatched sides there. It's important to track these throughout the season to see how teams are tracking, because a lot of the time those numbers even out, especially once it starts to become too big of a disparity, but a few teams are heading that direction. Then looking at the ATS results from last week, the underdogs covered 6 of the 8 games. The only favorites who did cover last week were Gold Coast against Hawthorn and Geelong against North Melbourne. Of the games where underdogs covered 6 of the 8, the favorites won 5 of those 8 games, but 3 underdogs that did win outright were the Brisbane Lions against Melbourne, Essendon, who beat the Western Bulldogs, and then West Coast, who beat Richmond. Also in there, St Kilda lost by 1 point against GWS, and Fremantle, who lost by 3 points against Port Adelaide. So both those sides were nearly $4 odds to win their games, and both were nearly able to win as well. So we nearly had 5 underdogs win outright from the 8 matches. Now, looking ahead to the games coming up this week, starting on Thursday night, St Kilda take on the Western Bulldogs. This matchup, St Kilda are small favorites, -3.5. Last time they met, the Bulldogs were -11.5. But St Kilda did win that by 41 points. So that's definitely contributing to the odds movement since that meeting. But it was over a year ago. And I feel like there is a little bit of movement. St Kilda pushing GWS to 1 point, and the Western Bulldogs are struggling against Essendon last week. Contributed a little bit to that. But statistically, I feel like the Western Bulldogs have big chances of winning this game. There isn't that much between these two sides defensively, but the Bulldogs are a lot better attacking sides. So even though St Kilda have won 4 of the past 6 and covered 5 of the past 7, I think the Bulldogs can win this game. Interestingly, this is the first time St Kilda is favorite in this matchup since round 20, 2018. So that's definitely over the past few seasons, the Bulldogs have been favored in this matchup, and I think they should be favored again based on the numbers. And I think they can bounce back and win this game. Also, 8 of the past 12 have gone under at 161.5. That's a pretty low total, so be a touch nervous taking the under there. Adelaide versus Essendon, both sides coming off wins last week. Adelaide are 13.5 point favorites. They are a 1.5 point favorite last time they met. And last time in Adelaide, Essendon were 10.5 point favorites, but that was back in 2020, back in those shortened matches. This game is very, very interesting. I think too much is being made of Adelaide's performance against Carlton last week. They got their attack going, scored 100 points, and it completely exceeded what they'd been doing so far this season. It's a bit of a tricky game to bet into with confidence, because the question is kind of, can they replicate that again this week? But they face a side who is really poor defensively. So there is a big chance of them doing that, and they are at home. This game, I'm leaning towards the over 174.5. That's the most likely bet that I'm going to have. But I also do like Essendon to cover the plus 13.5. That'd be this kind of second way I'm leaning. The underdog has performed well in this matchup recently, covering the spread in 4 of the past 5. And not sure if I mentioned, but Essendon have won the past 6 against the Crows as well. So definitely like this game to go over. Both of the past 2 meetings have scored over 200 points. And if that number stays in those low 170s, I feel like that is a good bet in that game. But definitely leaning towards the underdog. Collingwood versus Port Adelaide. Collingwood off the bye, small favorites here, -4.5. Port Adelaide came from behind to win last Saturday night. This is another game where I feel like Port Adelaide should be favourite. Collingwood do have a good record, covering 6 of the past 8 against Port Adelaide, and they've won the past 3. But I think Port Adelaide can get this done. They only lost by 2 points in the matchup late last season. At the MCG last season, they did get blown out. But that was back in round 2. We know Port started the season really poorly. But looking through the numbers for this game, Port Adelaide are leaps ahead of Collingwood in almost every key statistic across the board. And for that reason, I feel like too much is being made of Collingwood's good record against Port in recent times, because go back a little bit further, back prior to 2021, Port won 7 of the 9 games during that period. So it's not like, Collingwood have dominated them for the past 8 to 10 seasons or anything like that. And statistically, Port should win this game. So I feel like them at the plus is definitely a good play. Might even likely consider them at the money line, but Collingwood do have a record of winning games by small margins. So see what the line does. If we get it out to +6.5, +8.5, then we'll be playing the spread in that game. Carlton versus GWS. Another side game where Carlton are small favorites, but I think GWS can be winning this game, even though Carlton do have a good record, winning 3 of the past 4 and covering 4 of the past 5. GWS won the latest matchup the end of last season, 105-73 as 8.5 point underdogs. The lines come down a little bit, but not quite enough, I don't think. I think GWS should come into favorite for this game. The total at 175.5, definitely leaning towards the over, but the number's just a little bit too high for me. You see, it's 7 points higher than the last meeting. And even though, GWS are the number 1 attacking side this season, Carlton aren't far behind, and Carlton aren't all that strong defensively this season, whereas GWS are a little bit better, top 6, top 7 side. Like, it makes it a little bit tricky to take a high number for the over, but for those kind of same reasons, I think GWS win this game on the road. So I'm definitely interested in them. So if we look through the first 4 to 5 games here, like the Bulldogs as an underdog, like the Bombers, but more so like the overs, like Port Adelaide to cover, and like the Giants to cover there, all as underdogs. Good game on Saturday night. Brisbane take on Geelong. The Lions are 12.5 point favorites. I think they're deserving to be favorites at home. The home team's won 8 of the past 9 in this matchup, but Geelong has won 24 of the past 28. Had to go back quite a long way, but Geelong do have a really good record in this game. Statistically, Geelong are performing better than Brisbane, but Brisbane are slowly building and kind of getting better each week. So, as I said, Brisbane should be favorites. I think the number's slightly too high. Definitely have them in single digits favorite, but not really keen on taking Geelong as the plus. Definitely lean towards the Brisbane 1-39 as the play in this game. I feel like that is the highest likelihood of hitting as the main bet. West Coast take on Fremantle. West Coast coming off their first win of the season. Fremantle only losing by a small margin. Fremantle come up 33.5 point favorites. They won this game by 101 points last season. Feel like at that line, I'm not really keen on taking Fremantle. Defensively, they should be able to shut down West Coast. You got number 1 defensive side going up against the number 17 defensive side in the league. So that alone should be enough for Fremantle to be winning this game. But probably most likely not, a side or total betting game, and one to definitely be looking at the player props. Both these sides give up high numbers of possessions to the opposition, especially contested possessions. So it's a game where I'll be looking at the Fremantle ball winners to rack up the numbers. Sydney versus Gold Coast. The Swans coming off the bye, 19.5-point favorites. Gold Coast coming off a big win last week against Hawthorn. This game is interesting. The teams have split the last 8 meetings 4-4, and 7 of those 8 games have been decided by 24 plus points. So generally, whoever wins this game wins it by a big margin. We're leaning towards Sydney to win, but it's hard to see this game being a massive blowout. So I do like the Swans 139 in this game. I think Gold Coast can keep it close enough, but without winning. Sydney have covered 3 of the past 4. Last time they met in Sydney, the line was 22.5, so it has come down a bit. So Gold Coast have been showing some respect from their form this season. 4 of the past 6 head-to-head have gone over the total as well. With both sides being good attacking sides, I can see this being a high-scoring game, but the SCG not really the most ideal venue for high-scoring games, even though they did put up over 200 points in their matchup last season. The game earlier in 2022 only achieved around 136 points for that game. Don't want to dive too heavily into that over 172.5, but if it came down into the 160s, then I'd likely play the over. Then last game of the round, Hawthorn against North Melbourne. Hawthorn come up 16.5-point favorites. Last time they met in round 18 last season, Hawthorn were 18.5-point favorites and won by 48 points. The Hawks have covered the past 4 against North Melbourne and have won 14 of the past 18. So they should be winning this game. North Melbourne definitely struggled to stop teams scoring, but Hawthorn's attack really not gelling at the moment. They're the bottom ranked attacking side in points per game, so it's not like they're well suited to capitalize on that. And then looking at the total at 173.5, which it was last time they met here, 9 of the past 12 head-to-head have gone under. The past 5 at Marvel have all gone under. I'll be definitely leaning towards the unders in this game. Neither side really have the firepower to take advantage of the other team's poor defenses. So looking at under there to close out the round. So those are the ways I'm leaning for the games at this stage. If you want to follow along all the plays, make sure you check back for the videos later in the week. Turn on notifications. Make sure you like this video if you like these videos each week to get you thinking about your potential angles for your bets coming up later in the round. As I said, the videos later in the week, I go through the statistics for each matchup and break down which players or which teams and bets that I'm exactly making.